I was 10 when my parents, Laura and Michael Reeves, vanished after a weekend by the ocean. All I had left was their last photo, smiling, sunburned, with sand stuck to their faces. For nearly 2 decades, I believed they'd left us. But last spring, a construction team dredging a canal unearthed a rusted sedan with their luggage still in the trunk. If this story resonates with you, leave a comment below and tell me where you were in 2005, what you remember, and what you'd have held on to if someone you loved didn't come home. It's strange what you keep and what you let go. When you're 10, you can't carry much, so you pick one thing and hold it hard. I chose that beach photo. I learned to read the grain of the print like a map. The freckles on my mother's nose, the way my dad's sunburn ran up into his hairline. My grandmother had it framed. She hung it in the hallway and wiped the glass every Sunday like she was dusting the past back into the present. I kept my anger too. It was easy in middle school. Anger feels grown up when you're small. I built stories where they ran away. I built reasons, the bills, Dad's layoffs, Mom's sore back from the diner, the way they looked at each other when they thought I wasn't watching. In all those versions, I made myself the quiet reason they drove off. That's the other thing I kept, a dull guilt, heavy and private, like a rock in my pocket. Years passed. I became a person who knows how to pay rent on time and fill out forms. I learned how to buy tires, how to use a plunger, how to pretend a family is fine in public. I smiled in the way people expect you to smile when they find out you grew up with your grandparents because something happened, and they tilt their head like they're trying to hear it. If anyone asked why there was no funeral, I had the script. No evidence of foul play. They just never came back. The year 2005 faded into a simple sentence. Then last spring, on a Tuesday that smelled like warm asphalt, the phone rang. I still had the landline at the house because my grandmother refused to let it go, and after she passed, I kept paying the bill out of habit. Sometimes I don't know if I'm maintaining a home or an exhibit. The woman on the phone introduced herself as Avery Dalton from the county sheriff's office. She used the slow tone people reserve for bad news and older ears. I'm not old, but my heart is. She said the county was dredging Barlow Canal between River Road and Highway 6 to repair an old culvert before hurricane season. The water level had dropped. The mud had been scooped back. They'd found a car. A '97 Honda Accord, she said. Blue. The VIN matches your parents' vehicle. We believe it's been there quite a while. I sat down in the hall across from the beach photo. What does found mean? I asked. My voice sounded like I had borrowed it from someone polite. It means the vehicle is being recovered by the tow yard now, she said. We'll need you to come by the impound lot tomorrow to identify any personal effects. We're very sorry for your loss. Loss. The word arrived 19 years late and somehow right on time. After we hung up, I didn't move for a long while. Eventually I stood, wiped the glass on the photo frame, just like my grandmother, and left a clean oval where my hand had been. That night I slept in the living room with the lamp on. I woke every hour to the hum of the refrigerator and the thought that something underneath us had been waiting all this time. A car in the mud. My parents and the truth, both buried where no one looks. The next morning was bright in that way spring can be, too cheerful for the occasion. The impound lot sat behind a chain-link fence with a handmade sign that said, Morton's Towing. Inside, rows of dented cars sunned themselves like old dogs. Behind the counter stood a broad man with grease on his shirt pocket that spelled out his name, Caleb Morton. You must be Ms. Reeves, he said. I'm sorry about all this. Some things you pull out of that canal and you wish you hadn't. He led me to a back bay where the recovered sedan sat under fluorescent lights. It didn't look like a car anymore, more like a coral reef shaped like one. The windows were gone. The metal had bubbled and flaked. On the open trunk, a chain still hung from where they'd lifted it. The interior smelled like river and earth. On a metal table, someone had arranged what they'd found inside, like sorting seashells after a day at the beach. A scuffed suitcase, a duffel bag with a frayed strap, a pair of sunglasses missing one arm, 2 motel soaps in paper wrappers, a paperback mystery swollen with water, and a folding map of the coast, creased and stained. The map was the only thing that tugged me toward belief. My dad circled things on maps: diners with good meatloaf, shortcuts he could brag about, places to fish someday. On this map, a shaky circle marked a section of river road where it crossed the canal. "What made it go under?" I asked. Caleb rubbed his jaw. "That's for the sheriff and the county folks to figure. But that stretch, it's dark out there. No lights, soft shoulder. If you get just a little off, you're in the drink." He showed me a small evidence bag. Inside was my mother's keychain, a cheap metal dolphin with a bottle opener built into the tail. I pressed the bag to my chest like the charm might beat. Caleb cleared his throat. "We also found a disposable camera in the suitcase. Most of the film is ruined, but sometimes they can salvage images. The sheriff's office will handle it." I nodded, not trusting words. Before I left, I asked if I could sit in the car for a moment. He looked surprised, but he rolled the bay door down halfway and walked away to give me space. I climbed into the back seat and shut my eyes. I tried to imagine them, the bickering over what radio station to use. My mother's bare feet propped on the dash while her flip-flops sat on the mat. My dad tapping the steering wheel when he thought he recognized a song. If I concentrated, I could almost hear the whisper of tires on a road that did not forgive. When I finally opened my eyes, I noticed something wedged under the rusted back seat, a stiff sliver of plastic. I pulled it free. It was a motel key card, the kind with a magnetic stripe, still tucked into its cardboard sleeve. Printed on the sleeve, faded but legible, Seacrest Inn, room 212. On the edge, someone had written a date, 8/21/05. I slid the sleeve into my pocket. For the first time in years, I felt something other than anger. It was smaller, sharper, a clue. On the drive home, I kept patting my pocket to make sure the key card was still there. It felt like I was borrowing time from 2005, a little ticket that could say exactly where my parents had slept, or not slept, that night. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car with the engine off, staring at the front door and the world I'd built around a hollow center. I called the sheriff's office. Avery Dalton answered. I told her about the key card. She was silent for a beat, the kind of silence where you can hear someone blinking. "That should have been collected," she said. "Thank you for telling me. Would you be willing to bring it in?" "I'll bring it," I said. "But I want to go to the motel first. It's in our county, room 212. Avery exhaled. "You're not required to do that." "I know," I said. "But I haven't been required to do anything for 19 years. I'm going." The Seacrest Inn still stood on the quiet end of Meridian Beach, tucked behind a row of palms that had outgrown the sign. The building wasn't fancy, just 3 stories around a rectangle of a pool. The lobby smelled like lemons and sunscreen. The woman at the front desk wore a name tag, Naomi Pierce. Her smile was the kind you practice. When I showed her the keycard sleeve, it fell away. "I remember that summer," she said. "We had a series of break-ins along the boardwalk, people coming in from the beach. Everyone was on edge. But a couple like your parents. They were sweet, you know? Polite. They checked in around 2 in the afternoon and took off for the water. I think your father asked for extra towels." She closed her eyes briefly, then looked at me. I was 20 then. I didn't know what I didn't know. Is there any way to see their registration? I asked. Or the credit card they used? Naomi called the manager. A few minutes later, a man in a shirt with palm trees on it appeared. He introduced himself as Ethan Blake. Together they went into a back office and emerged with a banker's box labeled 2005 Q3. I felt a prick of hope. Not everything gets lost. We spread papers across the counter. Naomi slid out a registration card written in my father's handwriting, the scrawl I knew from school permission slips. They had paid cash. There was a storm that weekend, Naomi said, pointing at a note stapled to a report. Lightning hit our east side breaker. The security cameras went down. We only had power on one wing, so we moved some guests around. Room 212 kept power, though. That much I remember because we kept sending people out for ice. She lifted another paper. It was the nightly log, the kind front desk workers keep when nothing is as quiet as it looks. On 8/21/05, a line read, 212, extra towels requested, 7:40 p.m., young couple. Under that, noise complaint near vending machines at 8:05 p.m., subject intoxicated, escorted off property. Can you describe the person? I asked. Naomi shook her head. We never got a name. Boardwalk vendor, maybe. We had a lot of drifters that season. But the cops were called twice that night because of that guy. She photocopied everything for me. When she handed the pages over, our fingers touched, and I had to look away. In 2005, Naomi would have been about my age now. Time has a way of flattening you into a number. Before I left, I rode the elevator to the second floor and stood outside room 212. Through the thin door, I could hear the soft thump of a TV and someone laughing. I pictured my mother ordering pizza, my father using the bottle opener on her dolphin keychain to pop the cap off a root beer he preferred to pretend was a beer. Maybe they fell asleep to the hiss of the AC, the salt air sneaking in through the gap under the door. Back in town, I took the papers to the sheriff's office. Avery met me in the lobby and ushered me into a conference room where a young detective sat with a notepad. He introduced himself as Logan Price. There's always someone younger than you who looks like they were born wearing a badge. Avery thanked me for bringing the keycard sleeve. While Logan photographed it, she told me the medical examiner was at work on what they'd found in the car. She used phrases like partial remains and consistent with two individuals and DNA confirmation. The words floated near the ceiling. I nodded as if they might land. I slid the photocopies from the motel across the table. They asked for towels at 7:40 p.m., I said. That means they were alive then. That's later than they usually would have left for home. Maybe they planned to drive after dark when the traffic died down. The motel reported a disturbance around the same time. Maybe they left because of that. Logan tapped his pen. We'll follow up with the motel. In the meantime, there's something else. The highway department sent over archived maintenance records for River Road and the bridge over Barlow Canal. He turned a paper toward me. There were complaints in 2004 and 2005 about a guardrail section near the canal bend. Missing bolts, some sections loose. It says, temporary repair scheduled. Then the entry ends. No follow-up. What does that mean? I asked. It means someone made a note and nobody fixed it, Avery said. Logan added, it also means if a driver drifted or swerved, the rail would have given way more easily. They let me read the complaint logs. One was handwritten by Victor Hale, a county maintenance supervisor, reporting impact damage after a minor accident on 7/4/05. Another was an email from Lydia Ramos, a nearby homeowner, who wrote that she had watched two cars take the bend too fast and scrape the rail during rainstorms. She wrote, A child will die here. I took a copy of the names. I want to talk to them, I said. Avery hesitated. Ms. Reeves, this is an active investigation. I know, I said. I'm not trying to be the cops. I just want to be a daughter who knows where to put her grief. She let me go with a look that said I was going to do it anyway. First, I drove out to Barlow Canal. The sun was low, and the water ran like coffee with cream. Work crews had built a temporary cofferdam and cordoned off the section where the car had been found. I stood at the edge of River Road and looked down at the mud slope. The angle was brutal. If you went off, you wouldn't have a second chance to correct it. There were no lights, just the hard brightness of daylight and the unforgiving dark of night. I tried to picture headlights, the shape of my parents' sedan. I imagined rain, a swerve to avoid something, maybe a raccoon or a dropped cooler. I tried to picture that guardrail holding and then not holding. My stomach bristled like it knew where it would have rolled. From the canal, I drove to a tan house on a little hill overlooking the bend. Lydia Ramos answered the door, small and bird-like, her hair white and fierce. She recognized my name before I gave it. I followed that story when it happened, she said. The missing couple. I thought about you a lot. People always think of the lost ones, not the ones waiting for the door to open. She invited me in and made tea as if time allowed for kindness. She told me that in the early 2000s, she called the county multiple times about the guardrail. She had a notebook where she logged her calls. She showed me the pages. Her handwriting marched across the lines, each entry with a date, the person she spoke to, and what they promised. 7/14/05, spoke to Victor Hale, she read. He said a crew would be out soon. The crew came and put a cone at the start of the rail. It sat there until the wind took it. What did you see on August 21st? I asked. She squinted, rolling the date on her tongue. Storm clouds, a smell of wet dirt. Around 9, I heard tires spinning, like rubber on gravel. I stepped onto the porch. Then, I didn't see a car. I saw the absence of a car. The kind of silence you only notice when something big has stopped making noise. Did you call it in? I called, she said. But it was dark and quiet afterwards, and when the deputy came by, there was nothing to see from the road. The water was high. Sometimes, sweetheart, the earth hides what it took. I thanked her. I didn't cry there. I saved that for the driveway when the air finally touched all the places the house had been holding together for me. The next day, I tracked down Victor Hale in a small office behind the county maintenance yard. He looked tired the way paper looks when it's folded too many times. I remember that section, he said without preamble. We had a run of storms that summer, a sinkhole on Route 4, a bridge closure in Garrison. I logged the guardrail because I had to. We were understaffed. The county commission kept pushing the budget vote. I'm not making excuses, Ms. Reeves. I'm telling you how it was. He rummaged in a desk and pulled out a file with dog-eared corners. Inside were printouts of purchase orders for rail bolts and posts stamped Received 9205. He laid them on the desk like apology cards. They arrived after, he said. We installed them the following week. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. After, I repeated. He looked at me, the kind of look that knows it can't fix anything. There's also this, he said, handing me a photocopy of a memo. It was from the commission meeting on 8/23/05, 2 days after my parents disappeared, approving emergency funds to repair critical roadside infrastructure near Barlow Canal following heavy rainfall. I took the papers and left. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel and felt a kind of anger that didn't feel young at all. It felt ancient. It felt like the canal, slow and wide and patient. The next week, the sheriff's office called. The medical examiner had matched DNA from the remains to my parents. The disposable camera had yielded 3 blurry images of the beach, one of a sunset and one of the motel room, my mother's feet on the bed, my father making a face at the mirror. Avery asked if I was prepared to collect their personal items. Prepared was an interesting word. I said yes. The belongings were modest. A pair of flip-flops that had come apart, a chain necklace of my mother's, my father's wallet with a damp business card from a bait shop. In the suitcase, tucked into a side pocket, there was a folded receipt from Seaside Pizza, time-stamped 8:16 p.m. 2 pepperoni slices, 1 salad, 2 sodas. The tip line had been filled in with my father's scrawl. They'd eaten. They'd laughed. They were alive and ordinary in the way you don't know is precious until it's not guaranteed. Avery sat with me in the lobby for a few minutes afterward. The fluorescent lights hummed. The vending machine rattled, dispensing a bag of chips for someone I couldn't see. "We're preparing our report," she said gently. "Based on the angle of approach, the tire marks, and the guardrail damage, it appears your parents left Meridian Beach around 8:30, headed north on River Road. They likely encountered standing water near the Canal bend. The right side tires dropped onto the soft shoulder. With the compromised guardrail, they broke through. Heavy rain and the canal's slope pulled the vehicle under quickly." "They didn't leave," I said. It wasn't a question. Avery shook her head. "No, they tried to come home." The report came out 3 weeks later. It was clean and dry, full of words like hydroplaning and guardrail failure and submersion interval. It concluded that Laura and Michael Reeves were victims of a single-vehicle accident exacerbated by infrastructure defects. The county released a statement expressing condolences and promising a review of safety protocols. A week after that, the local paper ran a front-page story. They used the beach photo, the same one that had lived in my hallway all those years, and the picture of the car being lifted from the muck, hanging like a dark bell. The headline read, "19 years later, truth surfaces at Barlow Canal." The reporter, Emma Whitfield, called and asked if I'd be willing to talk. I said yes because secrets had grown in the quiet, and I was tired of giving them light. I told her about the motel key card, the extra towels, the pizza receipt, the maintenance logs, the memo from a meeting 2 days too late. She wrote it all down and then said a strange thing. "This will help other people drive safer there, you know. It's a weird comfort, but it's something." It didn't feel like comfort. It felt like a ledger. On one side, my parents. On the other, a larger, safer rail. The county held a public hearing. The room smelled like coffee left on a burner. People wore their church clothes and their tired faces. Victor Hale spoke, voice rough, and accepted responsibility for delays along with the constraints of budgets none of them controlled. There were words like process change and accountability and audit. A younger engineer, Naomi Pierce, yes, the same Naomi from the Seacrest, life looping in ways you don't expect, now worked for the county transportation office. She presented new guidelines for repairs, maximum response times, third-party inspections, GPS-tagged photos to prove work completed. When she finished, she looked right at me and didn't look away. When it was my turn to speak, I carried the beach photo to the podium. I told the story you've heard. I told them about the rock of guilt I'd carried in my pocket, how heavy it finally felt when I learned it didn't belong to me. My parents did not choose to leave, I said. They were loved, and they were trying to drive home in the rain. They trusted the road to be the road. 19 years is a long time to learn a simple truth. After the hearing, a woman about my age came up with tears in her eyes. "My son drives that road every night to work," she said. "Thank you." I didn't know what to do with that. It felt like someone handing me a plant to hold while they tied their shoe, and then walking away and leaving me with it. I nodded and said I hoped her son would wear his seatbelt. The county eventually approved a modest settlement for negligence. I didn't feel like negotiating my parents' worth, but my grandmother had taught me to take what's offered if it can do good. I used most of it to set up a scholarship at the high school for kids who needed to leave town to learn something and then maybe come back and fix something. I called it the Laura and Michael Reeves Get Home Safe Fund. It wasn't much, but each spring I hand an envelope to a graduating senior and tell them about a faulty guardrail and what it means to pay attention. We held a memorial by the canal in late summer. The drought had ended by then. The water moved slow and brown. We installed a small bench under a live oak, the kind with roots that look like they're reaching for what they need. The plaque reads, "For Laura and Michael, who loved the sea and were loved more, 1969-2005. I picked those years because the report couldn't tell me the exact day they died, and in a way it didn't matter. Their true time had always been before and after. The final piece of the puzzle came in the mail one evening in a padded envelope from the sheriff's office. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was the disposable camera developed as far as it would go. Along with it was a note from Avery. "We thought you might want these." There were 3 usable photos. One was a close-up of my parents' sandy faces, the selfie from the beach I already had, but from a slightly different angle, like the moment had shifted. The second showed the motel bed with pizza boxes and 2 paper cups. In the background, my mother's flip-flops sat side by side on the carpet like 2 small boats headed in the same direction. The third was a blurry shot of the Canal bridge at dusk, taken through a windshield. Rain dotted the glass. In the corner of the frame, you could make out the guardrail, dark and bent. I stared at that picture for a long time. It wasn't proof of anything more than presence, but presence was everything I'd lost. After all of it, the sludge, the paperwork, the careful words, I expected relief to feel like a balloon rising. Instead, it felt like setting something heavy down and noticing the groove it left in the table. The groove remains. Grief, I've learned, isn't a door you walk through once. It's a room you visit, sometimes on purpose, sometimes because your feet just take you there. Now, when I visit, I sit in the quiet and remember a small moment. My mother shaking beach sand from a towel, my father holding the map and circling a diner where he promised he'd take me next time, the way the sun turned them into ordinary people made of light. I go to the bench near the canal often. From there, you can hear the new guardrail clink softly when trucks pass, like a sound checking in. Sometimes fishermen cast lines into the shade. They talk about the depth, how the bottom shifts with storms and back again, how old things wake up to be found. I used to listen for my parents in every car that crossed the bridge. Now I just sit and think about how many families trust roads without knowing the names of the people who nailed them together. A few months after the memorial, I got a call from Logan Price. He said a neighbor had come forward after the newspaper story, a man who'd been driving drunk that same night in 2005. He'd clipped the rail, kept going, thought better of it, turned himself in later for a DUI unrelated to the crash site. The report at the time hadn't connected him to the guardrail damage. The statute of limitations had closed around everything but the truth. I thanked Logan for telling me and wrote the man's name on a slip of paper. Ethan Blake. It was the same name as the motel manager, but not the same person. In a small town, you learn how names circle back like birds. I crumpled the paper, then smoothed it out and tucked it into the pocket of my coat. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself that people make choices in storms, and sometimes the storms decide anyway. I wish I could end the story with justice in capital letters, or with a judge's gavel, or with a movie-style speech that makes everybody stand up and clap. What I got was a guardrail that holds and a bench with my parents' names on it, and the quiet peace of no longer blaming the child I was. Sometimes that is the justice everyday life can offer. A few nights ago, I made a pot roast the way my mother taught me, slow and simple, carrots nice and soft. I set the table and put the beach photo by my plate. I told them about my day, the way people do in movies. It felt silly until it didn't. I said I forgave them for not coming home, and I asked them to forgive me for all the years I thought they chose it. When I cleared the dishes, the house was so quiet it sounded like it was breathing. I stood in the hallway and wiped the glass on the photo frame with the edge of my sleeve, the way my grandmother had. It's a small ritual, but rituals are what we have when we can't fix the big things. They are our polite way of telling the past we're still here. If you've listened this far, I want to ask you something. If the road you trusted failed someone you loved, would you fight the county, or would you sit by the canal and let the water carry it? Maybe the answer is both. Subscribe if you believe every truth eventually surfaces.